Welcome to the HR Empowerment Podcast, where we will uncover strategies and new insights from HR professionals who discuss up-to-date regulations, best practices, and the most pressing topics like diversity and equity, leadership, dealing with difficult situations, and much more that affect your bottom line and business. Thanks for joining us.
Hey everybody, Wendy Sellers here, the HR lady. We are on episode 4 of 5 of this podcast series about human-centered and inclusive policies, where JC and I are here with our guest, Julissa Martis. Did I pronounce that right?
You did. Hello, everyone.
She's the CEO of Legacy HR. Check out her website, LegacyHR. HRC. I knew there was an extra letter there, HRC.com. It's really cool. And it'll tell you how many coffees she drinks a day.
So 2, if you're wondering. Spoiler alert, 2.
It's funny. People always ask me like, wow, you must drink a lot of coffee. I'm like, I have about half a cup of coffee each day, because I am naturally just very high octane. And so trust me, you do not want me to have that full cup of coffee, and you definitely do not want me to have the second one.
Gosh. I just really love the taste. It's something about the taste of coffee. The caffeine is the added bonus, but I love the taste of coffee.
Well, especially with the Baileys.
Again, that's another episode altogether. So you mentioned it earlier, Julissa, and then JC, you did as well, about psychological safety at work. You know, what the heck is it, and why does it matter? You know, go ahead, JC.
Yeah, no, I could answer that one actually, and there's a little bit here, a little bit of backstory for you. So the term psychological safety was coined by Harvard Business School professor Amy Edmondson, and she defines it as a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. Establishing a climate of psychological safety allows space for people to speak up and share their ideas. And according to numerous studies, organizations flourish when they welcome collaboration and develop a sense of community. In fact, research demonstrates that corporate cultures with a strong sense of belonging have experienced a 56% increase in productivity and a 50% decrease in the likelihood of employee turnover. Nevertheless, psychological safety required in the workplace to foster this type of collaboration is very much commonly, very, very often misunderstood. Believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. You know, when I Googled a bunch of articles about psychological safety at work, or just period, you know, a lot of them discuss mental health care and mental health illness. And I want to kind of like erase that right now and just say, listen, psychological safety is allowing people to bring their full self to work. Unless they're a jerk, then you hold them accountable for that, right?
I mean, you know, I think there are levels to jerkness.
Yeah. But really, you know, I'll give you an example. Like, so yesterday I had a friend of mine text me or message me through Facebook Messenger, and she was saying, hey, we can't figure out my job title at work. Where do I find a job title based on my skills? And I said, well, your skills and then what you're actually using those skills for at work are two different things, because I have a lot of skills.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean I'm using them all for my job. Right. I may have in another job. So there's no, you know, there's no like copy paste, you know, with psychological safety, with skills, with everything. But I think the biggest thing that I find is when people are underutilized at work because they had to fit in a hole. Right. Mm-hmm. There's a org chart and you have to shove somebody in there. And I know you have other skills, but nope, you're not allowed to bring them here, or we don't want your opinion because of your title. And to me, that's where we really need to just start chipping away at the psychological safety at work of, hey, executives, don't get your feelings hurt that your employees know more about XYZ than you do. Why don't you just go ask that employee for their opinion and let them feel safe when they're telling you hopefully in a professional manner, that you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. And it's almost like it's a connect. To me, I connect all of the things that we've talked about, right? It's leading in a human-centered way, right? So taking accountability when you've messed up, really listening, then wanting to make sure that your policies, always looking at your policies to make sure that they're inclusive and your team feels supported. And then also just being willing to listen, no matter how awkward it could be, because it's very silent, and then doing something with that, whether it's actually doing something or providing feedback as to why we cannot do it this way, right? To me, like those things, like it's almost like it's a path to get that psychological safety. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of work for people to feel safe and to feel like they can bring their authentic selves and to feel like they can be honest and transparent about what they're feeling in the moment. Right. I will say, though, and I don't know if this is HR appropriate or not, Gen Z seems to be very comfortable with like setting boundaries and feeling, very confident about talking about like their needs and what they need right now. Whereas me, I call myself a geriatric millennial, I am in awe, because I'm like, I wish I would have had this confidence when I was growing up or coming up in corporate America.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, actually, because I think it's awesome. I think every generation teaches the other generation something new. We don't always like it, right? We usually, acquire that knowledge kicking and screaming because it's different and we don't like change. But every generation brings something new to the workforce. And then even just like generations are 20 years, 20 years apart from the beginning of a generation to the end. So folks, don't walk away from today, putting anybody in a box, because everybody's unique. Based on where they grew up, their education, if they grew up in the United States, what state they grew up in, all of that, but Gen Z, go for it, making sure, hey, teaching us old folks new tricks of saying, nope, here is my safety zone and you will not cross it. I'm like, yes. Now, that's also, Julissa, you mentioned it before about the Great Resignation and the quiet quitting, and there's a lot of that going on, and that generation is also leading that, because they just say, no, you've crossed the line with my psychological safety at work. I don't feel safe here. I don't feel included, and I'm out. And somebody else will take them in a heartbeat, because we're all desperate for good employees. What are your thoughts, JC?
I'm with you 100%. I'm also starting to think about the contrary perspective about Gen Z for a brief moment here, because and you're not going to like this. I know neither of you are going to like this, but I'm looking forward to what you have to say about this. They are so accepting and so inclusive that sometimes they become inclusive and accepting of toxic behaviors. That's where sometimes it's up to us, even within the workplace, while they're defining their boundaries, it's up to us who may have been at an organization for some time, that are establishing the bounds of psychological safety, to make sure that we put the proper protocols in place so that people aren't led down the wrong path, basically. That we don't force feed a generation of employees coming into the workplace bad behavior through promotion of toxicity being misconstrued as something positive, because that's what we do at our workplace. Do you know does that make sense? I'm having a hard time explaining it, but I hope y'all are following me for a second. It's an intriguing thought.
So if I understand this correctly, and definitely tell me if I'm not, it's it's great that they're confident, but sometimes in being so confident, they're not being inclusive of the backgrounds and the personality types of other individuals, right? Like they're
not necessarily. Okay. But let's put that the other way. They're so accepting, they accept everything. They're so inclusive.
They accept the bad behavior too.
Yes,
got it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
okay. Such and such doesn't have to show up to work, right?
They accept the toxicity, right? And then the bad things turn into things that could potentially fester. That's where creative control really comes into play in designing, in the proper design of the culture of our organization.
Yeah, company culture, folks, what we started talking about company culture and just saying like, it's not a policy. It's not a list. It happens organically. Mm-hmm. But you as a CEO, CFO, HR person, you can help mold that by holding people accountable for their bad behavior, even if other people accept their bad behavior. Oh, that's just Jimmy. You'll get used to him. And it's like, no. I always say, no, we're not going to make anybody get used to Jimmy. We're going to hold Jimmy accountable, or we're going to get rid of Jimmy.
We could pick a different name. That's fine.
Sorry, Jane.
And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you do need help with any of these steps and processes, please stop by legacyhrc.com or thehrladyllc.com. Both these fine professionals on the program would definitely be more than happy to help you head down the path of establishing your company culture. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Am I right?
And absolutely. Thanks, JC, for the marketing ad there. Going to wrap up this episode 4, but before I do so, and we go on to our last episode, if you are interested in learning more about psychological safety at work, there is something called the 4 stages of psychological safety, and it was developed by Dr. Timothy Clark. And so I encourage you to just Google 4 stages of psychological safety. And it covers a lot of things that we've already talked about, starting with inclusion and then, learning about giving and receiving feedback. It goes on to contributor safety, meaning, okay, are people feeling safe to contribute their skills, even though it's not on their job description? And then challenger safety. Are people feeling safe to say, you know what, I'm not okay with the status quo and I want to speak up? So please go ahead and look that up and learn a little bit more about this and see how you can implement it in your workplace and maybe what stage you're at, or maybe one department's at one stage, one's at another. We will be right back with the final episode of this session. We'll see you in a minute.
Thank you for joining the HR Empowerment Podcast, brought to you by Aurora Training Advantage. We hope you've gained new insight and strategies to navigate the HR profession. We look forward to you joining us again on the HR Empowerment Podcast.